and welcome to our series about the basics of keeping and maintaining houseplants. In this video, we'll be covering a segment called Basic Houseplant Care Part 1. Part 1 will be going over pots and soil. When potting your plant, there's some important things you need to consider with the kind of pot you decide to use. 1. Drainage, 2. Size, and 3. Material. Now, the most important factor to consider in the type of pot that you're deciding to use is having a drainage hole. The reason why drainage holes are needed is so that excess water can filter out when you're watering your plant. If you don't have a pot or a container with a drainage hole, all that excess water can lay at the bottom and make your plant roots prone to root rot, bacteria, and fungus. When soil is too moist and doesn't drain, you have a risk of attracting fungus gnats, which are very, very annoying, and I have some right now, and they are a big pest. They won't harm or damage your plant or kill your plant, but they are very annoying. So one way to bypass not having a drainage hole is to line a container with pebbles and rocks and then putting the soil and your plant on top of that. The excess water can then stand with the pebbles rather than soaking in the soil and the plant roots. When you water a plant in a container like this, water very carefully and only when the soil is dry. Don't absolutely drench the plant so that you can avoid the excess water issue and the fungus gnats. It is still optimal to have a container that has some form of drainage so that you can avoid all these possible problems, because they do end up happening eventually, because it has happened to me. I've had some plants in containers without drainage hole, and I end up always repotting them in one with holes anyway, so it might be easier just to get a pot with a drainage hole in the first place. So next is size, and that's important to consider because your plant over time will grow and outgrow the size of its pot, much like hermit crabs in their shells. If your plant has more room, it'll keep growing until it outgrows that pot. I wouldn't plant a tiny plant in a huge pot since it'll take a while to get that big, but make sure they do have some wiggle room. You want to give your plant a bedroom, not a closet, so eventually when your plant gets big enough, you'll need to repot it. And if you have a plant in a too small of a pot, the roots can get constricted and slow plant growth, so going a little bigger is always better. The material of your plant pot isn't too detrimental to your plant. The most common plant pots material are terracotta, ceramic, and plastic, and I will show you pictures of terracotta, ceramic, and plastic. Terracotta is the most permeable, which means some moisture can escape and get in when you're watering your plant. You'll notice this by the moisture build on the pot. Terracotta pots are cheap, which is a plus, and ceramic can be prone to cracking if it gets too cold, but this shouldn't be a problem with indoor plants. It's mostly a concern if it's an outdoor plant. Plastic pots are completely safe for your plants, and they're also cheap. Only a small amount of plastic chemicals are leached off into the plant, but most of it is washed away between waterings. Next is soil, the lifeblood of your plant. Getting soil nowadays is fairly simple since almost all stores designate what is outdoor soil, potting soil, succulent and cacti soil. So if you buy succulents and cacti, then you'll definitely want to buy succulent and cacti specific soil because this kind of soil is purposely made to be well draining, which is what succulents and cacti need. Every year or so, you do need to replace the soil in your houseplant so that they get fresh nutrients that they need. I have admittedly been bad at this, which does slow down your plant growth. A way I cheat this a little is by giving my plants some plant food, which is fertilizer, but don't be lazy like me and replace your potting soil every year for plants that grow fast, and for slower growing plants, you can replace it every 2.5 years. So an example of a slow growing plant would be a snake plant. So this is really important. When repotting your plant in another pot or with new soil, either one, do not water your plant immediately afterwards. Repotting a plant is traumatizing to it, and there's some risk of the roots being torn or damaged in some way just through that transfer. The plant needs to acclimate to its new pot for about 3 to 5 days, or even the soil, so that the roots can heal and scar over. So if you immediately water a plant after repotting it and the roots are torn or have some kind of damage, there are risks of the roots getting root rot and your whole plant dying. I know it's tempting to think that water will make your plant really happy, but they just need some time and space to adjust. If you notice that the leaves are starting to wilt while you're waiting for your plant to adjust to its new pot or new soil, a few days without water isn't going to be a detriment to your plant, unlike root rot, even if it does make you sad to see them looking thirsty, but I promise they'll be okay. So that is the basics of pots and soil. Stay tuned for Basic Care Part 2. Happy planting!